Hi, this is James, and this is one of the last videos in my series before my EP comes out April 18th. Check it out when it comes out. Old Conversations by James Coe. And for this, I want to talk about what makes a song or album perfect. What makes music perfect? And I've seen a lot of discussion of this online. Like, you'll see it on like Twitter a lot. But like, there is actually a decent discussion being had, which is what makes art like perfection. Because I think what a lot of people look at now is like, is each component of it great? Which makes sense. If something is perfect, then all components, all aspects of it should be perfect, right? That's like the definition of perfection. So I do think that you can count something if it is perfection in every aspect of it. It's a textbook 10 out of 10 project. There's nothing that should stop it from being deemed perfect. But at the same time, I think what that's really coming down to is like, how accurate is the work? And what I mean by that is, how accurate is it? How close is it to the true feeling that they're trying to express or articulate through the art itself? And that accuracy is really what deems it perfection. That is the real attribute that you're looking for. Because the thing is with technical perfection is that only aids in the articulation. You know, you can have the right words to say, but if you can't get the words out, then what's the point? You know, I mean, that's with like speaking. Like if you're writing a speech, you can write a perfect speech, but if you mumble all the words, people aren't going to know what you're saying. That's how I think of like technical perfection. And yeah, I mean, like that's something that is really at the core of it. And that also brings into question things that fail on a technical side, but in terms of messaging, in terms of artistic intention, are perfect. And for that, I think of certain things that I love, which is like, would be something like Daniel Johnston, where it's like, there's technically, this is not doing what it's supposed to do. You know, maybe his voice is off key, but it kind of contributes to the feeling. It kind of does something that makes it perfect. It makes it beautiful in a way. And the other thing with like discussions of perfection is there's a belief if it's a project, every song has to be perfect. Every song, there can't be a skip. There can't be anything. And I agree with that in an album sense. I'm not going to call an album perfect if there are songs on it that I actively don't like. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is actively don't like. There, I think, can be a perfect album with a song that I don't skip when I'm listening to the album itself as a whole, and it can be relatively worse than other songs on there, and I still think it's perfect. Now, how can that be true, right? Like, when you think about it, if it's perfect, then every song should be a 10 out of 10. It can't be one song is a 9 out of 10 and it's perfect, right? You should average it out. It should all be perfect. You can't just deem something perfect willy-nilly, I guess. That's the mindset that a lot of people have. But in my mind, I think it can be perfect without each individual part of it being isolated and by itself perfect. There's some better examples of this on like albums where I'm going to use Die Lit. Because I love that album. I believe it's perfect. You have a song like Top with Pierre Bourne, and a lot of people view that song as like bad on the album. It's like the one song that's kind of universally agreed to be kind of bad. But in my mind, I'm like, I think it totally fits the mood of the album. It fits the aesthetic. It sounds pretty decent. Why is that holding it back from being perfect? It doesn't make any sense to me. Because why am I saying that this 8 out of 10 song isn't 10 out of 10, so the whole album itself is hurting from that? When I'm listening to it in a whole and I'm not hurt by the experience of listening to that song, it's just maybe in isolation. I'm not going to be listening to that song by itself because I'd rather listen to other things on the album. You know what I mean? Like, how is that a metric when judging something being perfect? And nostalgia plays such a big factor too. Nostalgia can turn something that isn't technically perfect, isn't even articulated well, into a 10 out of 10. You'll see that a lot with like certain like emo artists that get kind of like, maybe people liked them when they were a teenager and related to it a certain way, and they're older and now they're like, actually Fall Out Boy's second album is amazing, or Panic at the Disco's their first album is amazing. When it's like, when you listen to it, it might not be that way. I think Linkin Park is another band that like totally fits that mold of like, there are a lot of like there's a lot of corniness to Linkin Park, but there's also a lot of like great stuff when you're wanting to relate to it in a way that when you listen to it years later, you're going to be like, man, this is incredible. And I don't think that's like invalid to view it as perfect because of that. And there is a sort of pass you can get with perfection when there is nothing else that sounds like the album, right? Because that album then can't be compared to something else. You can't say that it's just relatively worse than another version. It's relatively worse than this. We thought this was perfection because it was all we had. Like, technically, the first movie that ever came out would have been seen as like perfect, even if there were issues with it, but because people didn't know what they were doing, right? So the next movie that was made, it could be judged based off that. That's the only way we're able to actually like quantify any piece of art, is just by judging it relative to our taste formed by whatever is the last thing that we've consumed. And yeah, I think that's just a way for certain artists can kind of escape like that sort of metric, because if they're fully original, who are they getting compared to? And I don't think that's like something people are like, oh, I'm being original so I can get some sort of like critical worth. No, I just think it's more like in the sense of you can embrace the originality in a way that enables audiences to enjoy it more because they aren't thinking of it relative to something else. And yeah, I kind of just want to wrap up there. Those are my thoughts on this issue. And check out my EP when it comes out. Old Conversations, James Coe, April 18th. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. What do you think about this? And yeah, watch the other videos in this series if you like this one. Thanks for watching.